Welcome to the Distinguished Physical Education Podcast. This is Gary Zaharatos. Just a quick thank you to those who have purchased my book on Amazon. So many of you have reached out with encouraging words and feedback. I'm looking forward to hearing how it will impact your practice and your students' learning. For those who are interested in checking it out, search for Becoming a Distinguished Physical Education Teacher on Amazon. And if you haven't already, be sure to join our Facebook group, Distinguished Physical Education, where we are always happy to help teachers with their problems of practice. My guests today are Tyler Quinn and Jessica Templeton. Tyler received a Bachelor of Science in Kinesiology with a physical education emphasis at Shenandoah University in Virginia. He has been teaching elementary physical education for 7 years, the first 3 in Arlington Public Schools before moving to Colorado in 2020, where he taught in Jefferson County for 3 years. Tyler currently teaches PreK through 5th grade PE at Columbine Elementary in Denver Public Schools. Jessica has taught for 24 years in Denver Public Schools. She started her career as a 3rd grade teacher and was in the classroom for 16 years before pivoting to teaching PreK through 5th grade physical education at Gust Elementary School. She has mentored numerous teachers over the years and currently serves as a regional team specialist, planning and delivering professional development for PE teachers across the district. I've had the pleasure of working with Jessica for several years, and it has been truly inspiring to watch her transition from the classroom to the gym. She has seamlessly adapted and implemented many of the impactful teaching strategies that made her a distinguished classroom teacher, allowing her to create a high-quality PE program for her students in the gym. I met Tyler at the beginning of the 23-24 school year, and knew instantly that he was going to be a tremendous asset to the students and community at Columbine Elementary. His growth mindset and willingness to reflect on his practice, combined with his well-structured learning environment and rigorous daily objectives, make him one of many phenomenal physical education teachers here in Denver. During our conversation, we discussed topics such as creating a safe and welcoming learning environment, strategies for setting up the gym to support high expectations for student behavior, class rules, activities for the first week of school, gym entry and exit procedures, planning for the first day of school, advice for new teachers, and other topics. And now I bring you Tyler Quinn and Jessica Templeton. I appreciate both of you making time to share your expertise today. Tyler, let's start with you. So what are some things that you can do to set up your gym so that the physical space is safe and welcoming and supportive of the expectations that you have for your students?
Yeah, so some of the big things I like to incorporate into my gym have to do with zones of regulation. I think it makes them like an easy place for kids to be able to experience those different feelings. So the first thing they do when they come in, there's these little signs on my door. It has the zones, and they just tap their zone before the warm up. Most of the time, they're really excited to get into PE. It's green. They're all ready to go. Sometimes you notice they might be in the yellow or the red or the blue. And so during that warm up time, that lets me be able to like check in on them. Inside of the gym, same lines as our what we call our Cougar Den, which is like our calming space. And that's just a place for them to be able to take a break, be able to self-regulate and be ready to get back into class. Maybe they lost a game, maybe somebody wasn't being nice to them, but it lets them have that space where they can kind of hang out by themselves. Those are 2 things that I think really help kids self-regulate and be able to be in the gym without pressure.
Jessica, do you do anything similar to that?
I do. I have the calming spaces in my office when I have kind of low lighting and books and little fidgets that kids can play with. So that's an area where they can go calm down. Or, if they just come in stressed about something at home, they can go and I'll offer that up to them. And then I also do have a peace path, which is a conflict resolution area for if there's interpersonal issues. So that is also in there. It does take some instruction at the beginning of the year, how to use the peace path and the appropriate times, but I do have that up at the beginning just so let's say.
How do you teach students how to use that peace path? Because you want it to be self-regulated. So how do you get kids to be able to do that on their own?
So I actually got the idea from Tracy Harton. She had like a little tag game that she played. And so for the conflict resolution, I think there was like a green, yellow, and red beanbag. And if you got tagged with the green, you just gave someone a high five. If you got tagged with the yellow, you'd say, oh, I'm sorry. And then if you get tagged with the red, you would go over, and I stand there when I'm doing this instructional lesson and, go through the steps. Okay, this is what you would do if you went to the peace path. And so we just go through the steps together, and then they go out and play tag again. So that's just to introduce it. It takes some time for some of them to understand the steps and how to communicate, but I find that it's pretty helpful for some of my students.
I don't know too much about the peace path. And then Tyler, I want to get back to you with the Cougar Den and talk about your conflict corner as well. Can you walk us through the peace path? Like, what is it that students actually say to each other? Like, when do they utilize it?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's different steps. And if you wanted, I could always give you a link and you could include it in your podcast notes at the end. But there's some different steps, and there's a lot of them. If you even search Teachers Pay Teachers, you can find all kinds of different ones. It tended to happen with me with a lot of second grade girls. Obviously, everyone's different, but second grade girls would just be upset with each other for whatever reason. And so they would go over there. And the first step is to just stop and breathe, take a deep breath, figure out where you are. The second step is talking about how you feel. So you would just tell the other person, hey, I'm feeling really angry right now, or I'm feeling really sad right now. And then step 3, you would express kind of what would make you feel better. Hey, I would feel better if whatever. And then you need to make sure that you take turns. That's the hard part for teaching kids. Like, one person talks and then you have to listen while the other person talks. And there's always 2 sides. For the 4th step, they brainstorm, like, how are we going to make this better? Step 5 is make a plan. So, hey, next time, if you bump into me and I feel upset, I'll use my words rather than pushing you back or whatever it may be. And then step 6 is resolution. Okay, are we good? If they're good, they, shake hands, give a fist bump, high five. But then it gives an option there. Oh, we're not so good. You need to go back to step 2. And so they have to start over and do it again. And then the last little visual says, okay, it's water under the bridge. Let's move on. And, most kids want to play, so they're not going to keep harping on it. So most of them are like, okay, let's talk about how we can make this work and then move on so we can get back into the activity.
Is second grade the first grade that you start that with, or do you do it with K1 also?
I started with second. I found that K1, I probably have to do a little bit more managing, and a lot of them aren't able to read the signs, even though there are visuals. I think it's tougher for them to follow the steps of it.
That seems like such a great strategy to have students feel empowered to go solve their own conflicts and to free you up to do all of the other things that you need to do while you're teaching. So Tyler, you had mentioned 2 things, Cougar Den, and then you also do a conflict corner. Can you describe either or both of those and how they've impacted your practice and students in your class?
Yeah, so the Cougar Den is something that really the younger kids use a lot more than my 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders. Kindergarten, 1st, 2nd, they all have those big feelings and they need a space to be able to kind of work through those without anybody bothering them. So there's a table set up in my gym. It's away from everything. I try to make sure when I'm doing activities, I don't have anything going near that table at any given time so that there is that space still. This year, what I'm going to try to do is I want to have 3 boxes on it, 1 yellow, 1 blue, 1 red. So if that kid is feeling really silly or just kind of not in control of their body and they know they're in the yellow zone, they can go to that yellow box. That yellow box has strategies like counting, taking deep breaths, whatever that strategy that works for them inside of that box. So they can do that and then they can rejoin class. The same with the blue and the red boxes. With the younger kids, it's been really helpful. They will take themselves over there. They'll set one of my timers up and they'll just hang out there for a couple minutes until they're ready to get back into class. If they're there for too long, I go hang out with them and ask them hey, what's going on? What can I do to help you out? How can we get you back into class? And usually they just lose track of time.
I can attest to that. I didn't realize that I was sitting in the Cougar Den that one time taking some notes on a lesson that I was observing. And there was a student there who was, I think, coloring. Maybe Did you have some coloring books there? And I was just being nosy and asking the student a couple questions. And it was amazing how matter of fact and mature this, 1st or 2nd grade student was. He just told me, Yeah, I was feeling a little frustrated, so I came over here and I'm going to finish coloring this owl's tail, and then I'm going to get right back into the activity. And I was like, oh, that sounds like a great plan. And he literally finished coloring 30 seconds later and then went in and was having a great time. So I think that speaks to the impact that it has on kids in your class. Did you want to say anything about the other one, which was Conflict Corner?
Yeah, it's really similar to what Jessica uses with her Peace Path. Conflict Corner has been like all over Twitter for years. And it's essentially the same thing. It's a couple steps for the kids to be able to work through. This year, again, kind of revamping each year to get it a little bit better for my classes. This one is going to have sentence stems on it. So it's like, I felt like this because you did this. I don't want to feel that way. Things like that. I can't remember off the top of my head exactly what it says, but general ways for them to have this conversation with each other. For me, I'll like introduce it. I'll kind of like run through what it looks like with the kids. And then in that first couple weeks of school, you're going to have the kids coming up being like, so-and-so's not playing by the rules. I'm like, cool, let's go to the conflict corner. And I get the whole class to come over. I pretend to be one of the roles and I'll walk through it with the kid. And then we all rejoin class. And like the big rule with the conflict corner is if somebody asks you to go to it, you have to. If you don't, you're coming to me and you're going to be hanging out with me for a little while. And nobody wants to miss out on PE time to be hanging out with the PE teacher.
I love the way you described that you use something that happens in a class early in the year, you bring the whole group over there and model it for everybody. So those are some really great strategies that will build the culture in a PE class, make sure that everybody feels like they're safe and they're welcome, and then they can start to resolve some of these conflicts on their own and not have to bug the teacher every time something little comes up. Let's move over into talking about class rules. So Jessica, can you share with us some of the class rules that you established with your students at the beginning of the school year?
Yeah, so I have 4 class rules that we go through. Be safe, be kind, work hard, and have fun. And I've had those for a few years. So most of the kids who have been at my school, are really familiar. They know what they are. We talk about them a lot. With the youngest students, the ECE, Tinder, sometimes even first, I really try to just focus on be safe for like at least the first month of school. I don't really have an issue with them working hard. They tend to do that anyway because they love PE, but the safety thing, I just think the space of the gym for those youngest students can be a little overwhelming. Coming from the classroom, I think we had chairs and we had this, and then when there's this huge room, kids tend to go in, and I think it's like a sensory thing for a lot of them. So we really talk a lot about safety with the youngest students. And then I also have my start stop signal. I use the whistle. So when I blow the whistle, everyone stops, sits down, voice is off, looks at me, and then I give new directions. I like the music stop signal, but the problem I have with that is when songs stop, then kids will just like stop. So I'm sticking with the whistle for now, but I do like the music stop signal. I just have to figure out how to fix that lull in between songs. So those are our main big ones. Be safe, be kind, work hard, have fun. And I feel like they can really cover pretty much anything that happens.
I had a few classes over the years where they were so well behaved that when the music would turn from one song to another, most of the class would pause and look at me. And for me, I did not consider that a problem. That meant that things were going pretty well most of the time. Tyler, anything you want to add on to class rules? Any similarities or differences you have with Jessica's?
I do use the music, and I think it's hilarious every time the music like pauses for just a moment. And like by like, I don't know, November, you'll have at least one kid yelling, "It's just the song changing." And they get it by then. My big rules are, and I was reading your book, Gary, and noticed that it was in there too, but the respect yourself, respect each other, and respect this place. They're just simple. You can tie anything back to one of those 3 at any time. And I think that's the key, is just keeping it really simple, because they're going to music, they're going to art, they're in their classroom, they're in the cafeteria, they're at reset. There's like rules all over the place for these kids, and keeping it as simple as you can for them, I think, is the most important thing. The other big focus I make in the beginning of the year is transitioning and like what it looks like to stop when it's time to stop. Something I just learned at the PE Institute I was at in Asheville was stop and slide. So anytime you're supposed to stop, you put the equipment down and then you slide away from it. Not only is that getting their locomotors in there, but it's getting them away from the equipment, because I can't be alone in this, but like the noise from equipment or just seeing it, it just like my attention immediately shoots to it and I can't focus on anything else. So to get the class going and be able to transition quickly, and make a big emphasis on that in the beginning of the year.
So is that just like a quick slide step away from the equipment so that they have distance between themselves and it?
Yep. Or a partner. So if they're having a conversation and you want to like be able to share out and they're next to their partner, they got to step and slide away from their partners.
That's really good. One of the things that I've talked to any teacher who's struggled with, students playing with equipment when they're trying to instruct is something very similar. Put the object on the floor and either ask students to take a big jump behind or a leap over it. So now the equipment is behind them, it's away from them, they can't see it, they can't touch it. But I do like just being more creative with that and working in different locomotor activities. How do you teach those things, like putting equipment down and how to freeze early in an activity? So I'll just give you an example. One way that I see a lot of teachers do it is they'll hand out their equipment, whether everybody gets a scarf or a Frisbee, whatever it is. And within the first 30 seconds, there's an opportunity for students to practice freezing and putting the equipment down, taking a shuffle step to the side. Do either of you do something similar, or do you have a different technique that you use to get students to actually just practice the task of freezing with equipment?
So with my youngest students, I usually do some sort of activity at the beginning of the year with gator skin balls, and that's like a perfect opportunity to do it. We practice the whistle, and then there's a lot of positive narration. It takes time. I do find by the later grades, students who've been with me know the expectation, and it's not as difficult, but it does take a lot of practice within some type of activity. You need to let them know, like, well, if we have to stop again, then that's taking away from your playtime. I think if you can do it perfectly, then we can move on to this next activity, or, you have more time to play. So just being really clear, if you show me you can do this, the whole class can do this, then we can move on to this next thing.
Yeah.
A lot of practice.
Anything else, Tyler? Same.
A lot of practice.
A lot of practice. Well, one thing that I hear both of you mentioning, and I know that you've both been doing this for quite a while, is that these things just take time. And I think, well, what I hear you both saying also is that this consistency throughout not just weeks, but months, but years builds that culture in your gym. And we don't want teachers to get discouraged either. If something's not quite working exactly the way they want, we want them to realize that they just have to stick to the plan and continue to have high expectations for students and hold them accountable and continue to build that culture in their gym. Jessica, what activities do you plan for students during the first week of school that provide them with opportunities to practice and internalize your expectations?
So I really try to work on community building, especially with the older kids, the first few activities. So making sure they get to know each other, learn each other's names, build relationships with each other. I get to know them. But at the same time, community building games where they can practice transitioning, practice the whistle, practice all the start-stop things. A couple of examples I had, and a lot of these examples came from the PE specialist. He's a really good resource. I get a ton of stuff from him. But one of them is Adventure Bingo, where kids, one of the first classes, they have a little bingo card with different activities, and they have to go around and ask their classmates, did you ice skate over the summer? Did you play football over the summer? And then they have someone write their initials and run a lap, and then they try to get bingo. So that's a really good one. Another one that I've done that was from the PE specialist is called, I think he calls it Crazy Cards Challenge. I changed it to Silly Cards Challenge, but it has a bunch of little goofy things that kids have to do, and they have to do them together. Pretend like you're rowing a boat, or it's very silly, but it gets them involved with each other. So I usually do things like that with my older kids, just things where they can get to know each other, but also still practice the routines and rituals. And with my younger students, it's a lot of locomotor movement. I mean, with them, you can do really just easy imaginative things. Oh, okay, let's tiptoe around like there's a monster in the corner. It got really cold in here, so we're frozen and we have to move slow. So movement games, but then, blow the whistle, make sure they can sit down, make sure they're quiet. Oh, okay, now we're going to walk back over here. So it's games where they're active, but the underlying theme for most of them is, can we follow the expectations of how to transition and listen and things like that?
So it's kind of like your hidden agenda. The kids are moving, they're having a great time, they're getting to know each other, but you also want to make sure that they're able to follow your expectations. Tyler, anything you want to add?
I like lead our recess, making the rules, explaining how the playground works and all that for the kids. So last year, this just kind of just thrown on me real quick. And I was like, all right, let's do this. So I've kind of had to change how I start my year, but now it's starting with recess games. So like the first week, I'm just teaching them some tag games, teaching them how to play a simple like soccer type game on the playground. But if you look in our standards, a lot of the standards, if you go all the way down to the bottom, it's like, how do you be safe in PE and how do you be safe at recess? And like, they're all connected. So it's like, I try to connect those things in there. The recess games, they involve multiple people. They involve being nice to each other. So it's all the same type of things, just through recess instead of community building, which is what it immediately goes into, because that's what I've always done first. You've got to build that community somehow. So I've also done the silly cards challenge. I think that's hilarious. They go wild with it. And then one of my favorites I've done lately is called Factory Line. And it's basically just, they have to work in their squad lines and they have to pass different objects in a specific order. So I give them a little book with the pictures of the objects. They have to go in order 1 through 5. Maybe they have to go over the head. Maybe they have to go under the legs. Maybe they have to pass with their elbows, their knees, their feet. Each level is different, but they have to follow the directions, which I love, like pointing out, like not every time is somebody going to be telling you exactly. You have to be able to look at directions too. And then they have to work in a group. And there's always a group that like, there's one kid that will make the mistake over and over. And it's a perfect opportunity to watch them help each other build them up, or take it as a whole class lesson and be like, are you more likely to succeed if your group is kind of harping on you, or are you going to succeed if they're really supporting you and giving you that motivation or those tips to be able to help each other out? So that's one of my favorites to start the year for sure.
Wow, those are a lot of great activities. Yeah, I'm still kind of wrapping my head around all those. Those are fantastic. I mean, I shouldn't be surprised when I get to come visit both of you and I see things later on in the year and how well-behaved students are, how they follow your expectations. It's because you set them up, for the first several weeks or month of the year in order to do that throughout. Tyler, let's move over into procedures that you have in place for when students enter the gym. So we know that if we want to get class off on the right foot, we can't just have kids running in the gym and their voices are out of control and their bodies are out of control. What does it look like when you first greet your students, and how do you ensure that you're going to have an orderly and safe start to your PE class?
Number one, non-negotiable is always meeting them at the door. The second that the clock hits the time that they're supposed to be out there is when I will pop through that door. I don't go out early because then I'm going to lose my little tiny bit of time in between classes, and I'm never late. I like make sure that I am always there right on time because they need to know that I'm excited for them to be there and they're excited to be with me. It also lets them see me as they come down the hallway. They know, oh, he's there. We need to be able to hear him because he's going to give us his instructions as we are in the hallway. I never talk over the class. I make sure they're looking at me. Sometimes I have a little trouble with the teacher and the teacher's trying to like do their discipline. I'm like, no, it's my time now. Like, I got it. Whatever's going on, we're going to work it out in the gym. So I give them as clear expectations as I can. I like to, with my older kids especially, get them going like as quickly as I can. So a lot of times it'll just be like some type of instant activity. Maybe it's a walk and talk. Maybe it's a toss and talk. I like them to be able to get that talking and like energy out for the first couple minutes of class. So I'll explain what they're going to be doing, where they're going. So when they enter the gym, they know exactly what they do. Now, if it's a class that in the beginning of the year, it's all like only a couple kids at a time, but later in the year, we'll let the whole class just walk in because they know the expectation by now. But in the beginning of the year, it's like 5 kids at a time, see if they go in, start what they're doing right. So they're the role models for the rest of the class. And if they're not following that expectation, they go out the back door, they come to the back of the line, and they will try it again until we can get it right. Because if you start your first 45 minute block on the wrong foot, that's going to be a long 45 minutes.
That is absolutely correct. One of the things that you mentioned in there is about how you show excitement about what you're about to teach. I learned that from an author. His name is Michael Linson. Have you heard of the book that he wrote, Classroom Management in PE, Art, and Music? And one of the main takeaways that I had from that book was that he said, when you show up to greet your students at the door, you need to be as excited to teach what you're going to teach today as you were yesterday, even if you may not be. And what that does is it really gets kids excited about the lesson. They know that they're about to have a good time in PE, and it gives you that opportunity then to communicate your high expectations and give students those opportunities to practice meeting those expectations in order to be able to participate in that activity. That was a great walkthrough. Jessica, is there anything that you would want to add to that?
Mine is pretty similar. Meet them in the hallway, let them know the expectations. Sometimes the expectation is that they would go to their home base spot. Sometimes it's an instant activity. I still am working through and learning how to do instant activities and make them successful. So I tend to lean towards going towards home base spots, but I definitely want to get more instant activities in there. I think another thing that I probably learned from you was when they're in the hallway, give them those expectations. Okay, we're going to walk in, hands to ourselves, and sit at a voice level 0. And then having a student in line repeat that direction, just, make sure they're listening. So I will do that. Wait, what are we doing when we go in? And make sure that they can follow it. And like Tyler said, if the whole class goes in bananas, then you line up the whole class. If it's 1 or 2 kids, I usually just say, oh, go back to the door and try it again. At the beginning of the year, some of them have to do it 2, 3, 10 times. It's okay. You just try it again. So yeah, just, again, practice and consistency and making sure you're holding them to those expectations.
I think that's a really effective combination. Checking for students' understanding of the expectations, and then, like Tyler mentioned too, gradually releasing students into the gym. And if you can even add on top of that, in some gyms, students can see their peers walk into the gym, so they can actually see them walking to their squad spots, or they can see them beginning an instant activity. If students can't see that because they're in the hallway or they can't see however the door is angled, and the teacher can narrate those behaviors to the rest of the class who's waiting. So now you're gradually releasing students into the class, and you're saying, I noticed that Tyler has already sat in his spot and he's at a voice level 0. Gary's doing a great job of sitting on his row. Can I have the red row now enter the gym at a voice level 0 and sit in their spot and have their eyes on me, etc. I think being able to do all of those different strategies really drives home what those expectations are and gives students the opportunity to start to internalize them. Do you have anything that you would want to add if students don't follow these expectations? We already talked quite a bit about how you practice them. So do both of you line students back up out in the hallway and restate the expectations, start over? Do you have any other strategies you might want to share?
I remind them too, like at the end of class, if they're like, wow, what time is over already? Well, because we had to line up twice. So next time, let's just come in and do it right the first time so we have more time to play. Because sometimes they don't get that connection. Like, wait, why is class so short today? Oh, because we need to practice a couple times. So making sure that they're aware of that so that they have a little more buy-in the next time. Like, hey, we really want to play as much as possible.
That's a good reminder for students so that they know exactly where their time went. Speaking of time, Tyler, you use a timer right in front of the class. Is that something that you'd be able to share a little bit about, like maybe how you utilize it, what impact it has on your classes?
Yeah, I was having trouble a lot this year with just being talked over, having to stop for different conversations, having to reset, redo. And I went on Amazon and bought a $10 timer that I could put up on the front of the class. Beginning of class, I put it at 45 and started counting down. Sometimes they would come into the gym and they realize it's already down to 40 because I tell them, like, your class starts up in your classroom. If you're not lining up for your teacher and walking through the hallways the way they want you to, like, you're losing your PE time. So that's really helped me have a visual aid, because you can tell a kid that they've lost 5 minutes, but they don't know what that is in the grand scheme sometimes. So having that visual of, like, you're watching your time tick away. Is it worth talking right now, or do you want to get into the activity a little bit more? And then on top of that, it helps me. I will lose track of time, especially that last 5 minutes. Oof, it flies by, and I think I can do everything that I need to, and I cannot. So that timer actually helps me as much as it helps them stay on track.
I want to ask you about that last 5 minutes and what that end of class routine looks like. But first, Jessica, something that I've seen you do a couple of times in order to communicate expectations and hold students accountable to them is I've seen you tell students that they have to follow an expectation a certain number of times. I remember that one time where you had like 5 levels of a game. Have either of you ever had to have students like earn their way into the first activity by saying, during this intro activity or during our warm up, I need to see us be able to start and stop on the signal 3 times in a row before we continue with class?
I have done that actually, now that you're saying it, with certain classes, especially like as I was talking about before with the Gators gimbal. Okay, can you guys show me that you can, follow the expectations of the whistle, sit down, have hands off equipment. If you do that 3 times, okay, now we're going to move on to the next thing. Or now we're going to get another piece of equipment out, to do this next activity. So yes, especially at the beginning of the year, to get them to part of that practice is like, okay, if you can do this, then we can move on to do this.
And it also is another great combination with what Tyler mentioned earlier, which is about being excited about your activities. If you can communicate to students that there are multiple activities and that you can't wait in order to get to the third one or to the fourth one or to the fifth one, they're going to be more likely to follow directions the first time so that they can get to all of the activities that you have planned for the day. Tyler, let's go back to you and talk about the last several minutes of class. So what is it that you're hoping to accomplish during that last 5 or so minutes of class, and what does it look like?
Yeah, so typically my last 5 has something to do with some type of conversation for the kids to have that kind of sums up whatever our lesson was for the day. If it's not a conversation, this year I'm really going to try to do the plickers. If you don't know what those are, they're little magnet. Well, I have them on magnets, but the kids, all they have to do is turn them to show their answer for a question. So it's a really quick exit ticket type thing. Or a sticky note wall where they write down their answer on a sticky note and they're able to just throw that up on the wall real quick. Doesn't even have to be with their name, just like some way I know they got something out of the lesson that day as an exit ticket. The other thing I'm going to be doing this year that I didn't do in the past was having equipment managers. So instead of having a full class cleanup, because we know like sometimes if you have every single kid cleaning up, they're racing over, they're throwing the ball around, they're doing everything they're not supposed to do. So like 1 or 2 of my squad lines would be my equipment managers. They're the ones that clean up that day. That way the rest of the class can do their exit ticket or they can have that conversation. This usually is like 5 to 7 minutes at the end of class. It's not a huge, long amount of time. It's a simple question, simple sentence stem for them to be able to answer the question with and have that conversation with their partner. Just to be able to there needs to be some discourse in PE. And that's something I'm fighting in my school. This will be my 2nd year in my school. I don't think there's been a lot of conversation in PE. I think it's been game. And it's great to play the games, but they need that connection. Maybe it's that social emotional connection of like, oh, if you lost today, like, how did that make you feel? How did you react to the loss? Whatever it was. So like getting that discourse started, and it goes through the class, but something to wrap it up at the end.
So that's not a topic that I've broached yet in any of these conversations. I'm hoping to get more people to listen before I throw that on them. But as you both know, the expectations that we have in DPS in Denver are that students not only can physically demonstrate standards-based concepts to us, but that they can also articulate them. So it's really nice to hear that you save a little bit of time at the end to give students opportunities to answer some questions so that if students were able to make progress towards your objectives, whether they are based on a physical skill or safety or something around social skills that you were teaching students for that day. Jessica, what about the last several minutes of your class? Anything you'd want to add to that?
Not a whole lot. I mean, I do stop 5 to 7 minutes early and bring the kids in for a closure. I haven't done the flickers or anything like that. I do a lot of turn and talks to show that they've achieved our objective and talking about whatever our objective is for that day. I also really think it's important to have that 5 minutes of closure just to get kids re-regulated for the classroom. As a former classroom teacher, I really appreciate them coming out and being ready. I think I could tell as a classroom teacher when they kind of had some time to wind down at the end of PE, or when it was like the game finished and then they came back to the classroom and they were so like amped up and talking about what happened. And So I think really having that time, and I tell the kids that I say, you need to be ready to go back to class and do whatever you were doing with them. So yeah, I spend those last 5 minutes not only talking about the objective, but also just getting kids to calm themselves and be ready to return to the classroom.
So it's really important not just to drive home your learning for the day or check students' understanding of the concept that you were teaching them, but also to have a nice orderly end of class so that it's not, bell rings and there's still equipment flying around and the teacher comes to pick them up and it's just chaos in there. So giving yourself a little bit of time to get everything closed out exactly the way that you would like to. I don't know if either of you do it, but there's a handful of teachers that I work with who will always save time for like a mindful minute at the end of class. I've seen them give students prompts that could have nothing to do with PE, but they certainly could as well. So it could be something like, in your spot, close your eyes and think about something nice that you want to do for somebody today, or think about someone in your life who loves you. So it could just be a nice way to just have students sit in their spots and be calm and think about something positive before their classroom teacher comes and picks them up. Do you want to talk about first day, either of you, or do you want to move into the advice for new teachers? I just don't want to feel like you're repeating yourself because we might have covered quite a bit of that. Let me give you a chance just to share a little bit if you want, because I think one of the things that some teachers think they might need to do on that first day is just get kids in the gym and sit down and talk about all the rules that they have. But during our conversation, I've heard both of you talk about how you multi-purpose your activities and teach your rules within the context of physical activity. Is there anything that you would want to add to what you've already said to describe what a typical first day for students looks like? We already know what the entry routine looks like. We know what the exit routine looks like. What else do you do maybe on your first day as you're starting to get to know your students?
I mean, I think a lot of the first day is the stuff we talked about, getting them to practice those transitions. I do spend a minute introducing myself. I have a couple slides introducing myself to them, my background, so they know a little bit about me, just to get a jump on the relationship building with them. Oh, here's who I am. Throughout the year, I'm going to learn who you are. So I do assign their home-based spots on the first day for a couple of reasons. It's just a nice structure, but it also, I think, helps me to learn their names and make sure, my goal is always like, I want to know every kid's name by the first week of school. So I think knowing their home-based spots helps me visually to get their names. So we do a lot of, they get up, they move around. I blow the whistle or I stay home base and they go back to try to get them to remember those spots as well. I usually do locomotors. Oh, skip around. Okay, now go back to your home base. So that's another thing we do on the first day, just to make sure they know where they are.
Anything you want to add, Tyler?
Very similar. I don't assign home-based spots. The only reason I don't is because one new kid in a class can completely change the dynamic. And if I put that kid next to the wrong one, I know you can change home-based spots, but I don't want to make it a whole big spectacle, like, oh, so-and-so, you got to move to this spot. So I let the dynamics kind of play out for a little bit, and then I do it. It does make it very hard to learn the names in that first couple days because they're not in one spot. It makes a huge difference. But yeah, I really focus on getting them moving. I used to do the come in, sit, talk thing, and it's boring for me. It's boring for them. You got to do it 6 times in a day, however many classes you end up having. So yeah, it's definitely like get them in, get them moving, teach through the games rather than trying to just lecture them.
It's great to hear 2 highly effective teachers who do things just a little bit different, because it shows to people that there's not just one way to do these things. Jessica has a huge amount of success with having students sit in home-based spots. And Tyler, you found a way to have success by having students, you have them in like a taped off box up by your screen. Is that right?
I try to mimic a classroom in some senses. And like most classrooms have a carpet in front of their screen where the teacher gives their instruction. So we have a taped off box in the front of the gym where I get to give my instruction. So if it's my turn to speak, they're probably going to be in that box. If it's not my turn, they're probably moving around in their squat spots, whatever it is. But that's where I bring them when it's time to like talk to them for more than like 30 seconds.
Any chance that you get, I think, to mirror something that the classroom teacher is doing, whether it's certain phrases that the teacher uses to get students' attention, or structures in your gym where you're going to set up your home base spots or your listening area, or your instructional area to look like the carpet in the gym. I mean, it's just brilliant because the transition from the classroom into the gym is going to be seamless, and kids are going to see that as just another class that they get to go to where there's still high expectations. The most fun class, of course, that they have, but they'll still realize that there's those high expectations and that they need to behave and stay on task. All right, let's just move into a couple final questions. So, Jessica, what advice would you give to any new PE teachers starting in their first ever school year?
So this was something a principal told me when I was a classroom teacher, and I think it's really important, and it supports everything we talked about so far today. But go slow to go fast. I think a lot of times people feel pressure to cover so many units or do so many things. And so they want to get started. Oh, let's get into this unit right away. But really spending time those first couple of weeks on rituals and routines is going to make it so much easier throughout the rest of the year. So even though it feels kind of slow and maybe a little redundant at the beginning of the year, it's going to make you so much more successful later on in the year. Another one is to be consistent and make sure you follow through and you hold kids accountable. If you're going to say this is the way you expect it to be, then make sure you can follow through on that. Oh, we're going to have to redo it if we don't come in correctly. Make sure you're willing to make them redo it. So be consistent and follow through. And then my last piece of advice, thinking back when I was a first year teacher years ago, is just give yourself some grace. Know that things are not going to be perfect. You might cry a lot. Some of us did, but give yourself grace. Especially if you are reflecting and trying your best, keep at it and know that it's going to get better.
Yeah. You mentioned being consistent, and I, of course, completely agree with you. But what happens, especially for a brand new teacher who might be trying out a lot of new strategies, whether they learn them in college or whether they are, testing them out from YouTube videos? What happens when they finally decide that, like, all right, this way that I've been trying to have students enter the gym is just simply not working? What's the approach that a teacher should take in a situation like that?
I mean, I think you can still be consistent and change, right? So you can tell the students, hey, we were entering the gym this way. That's not working. We're going to try it another way. I don't think consistency and change are opposites. I think you can still hold consistent expectations while trying new and different things. And I think being honest with your students too, that wasn't really working. You can be transparent with them. Oh, I thought that was going to work and it really did not work. So we're going to try something different. Letting them know that you're still learning. I mean, I still tell kids, like, I tried that and it was not successful. So we're going to try to do something else. They know, letting them know that you're human too. People make mistakes, not even mistakes, but you need to change to make things work better.
I think that honesty and transparency is so important. Not only does it help you shift over to a different practice, it lets students know that you're a reflective teacher and that you're just going to be honest with them. And if something didn't turn out the way that you want it to turn out, you're going to make that adjustment and communicate it to them. And we're just going to try as a class to get better and do things the right way. Tyler, any advice you would want to give to brand new PE teachers?
On the similar line is, like, change takes time. That's what I tell myself constantly. I've been a new teacher 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times now at a school. 1 year, I was at 3 schools in 1 year. That was wild. You can't expect to come into a school. You don't know what's happened before, what their teaching was like before. And, like, the kids just buy into everything you say. It's going to take most likely years. I've been at schools multiple times for 3 years. And that third year it's what I pictured my first year being. But it just took 3 years to get to it. Build the relationships. It's hard. You have to do it with an entire school most of the time. But, like, what I will see a lot of teachers do is give students something, like some type of treat, some type of bribe to get them to do what they want them to do. And that works for like 10 seconds. And then you're just ending up spending all your money to get these kids to do what you want. Like, take the time, teach them what it feels like to be intrinsically motivated. Teach them, like, how did it feel to be a leader? What is something made you proud of yourself in that day. So like get that intrinsic motivation up in your students and build the relationships. And the final, and I think this is probably the most important, this is like my number one thing, is being reflective. At the end of the day, like it's easy to blame a 10-year-old for your lesson going wrong, but you should also remember that child is 10 and something you did might be able to change something in the way you did it. I had a bad kindergarten class. Maybe I shouldn't have let them all go grab the equipment at the same time and run around the gym. Yeah. There's a lot of things you can fix within yourself before blaming other people. So I think that reflection piece is huge.
I truly do think that that is the key to being an effective teacher for a long time, is being reflective and being willing to implement new strategies and just try new things. Similar question, but let's still imagine that we're talking to a brand new PE teacher. Can you think of any common mistakes maybe that you made when you were just getting started that you would want to try to help other young folks avoid?
I tried to please them, I think, too much. I wanted to do the fun game. I wanted to do what they wanted to do. I wanted to like get them excited instead of like building actual class culture and community and all that. So I think my biggest mistake I probably made as a new teacher was just trying to play the fun games so that they liked PE. Kids like PE. They might not like every single activity you're going to do, but they're going to like it. They're going to enjoy the time with their friends. So I think that was a big one for me.
Somebody told me something a few years ago about the difference between trying to be friends with students and being friendly with them. And I do think that that was a common mistake that I made in my first year or two, was that you just feel like, well, if you can be friends with the students, then they'll listen to you, right? When really you need to be a friendly teacher, right? You don't want to be like the mean person, but you still need to have high expectations and hold all students accountable and all of those things. Jessica, anything you would want to add?
My situation was so different. I taught in the classroom, and then my first year in PE, I was team teaching with someone else who had taught for a really long time. So I wasn't really running the ship at that point. So I didn't really get to find my footing until I was teaching solo. But as far as a mistake that I think, again, it goes down to that consistency, maybe having like too many rules or talking too much. Like try to keep it clear and succinct. If you want kids to do this, say, I need you to do this, this, this. I think it's using too many words. And it's advice I've gotten as a parent, like, hey, when your kid's having a meltdown, you don't need to like lecture them. But it's really just being succinct and choosing your words carefully and your expectations so that, it's not overwhelming.
Well, I can't thank both of you enough, because you bring so much expertise and so much experience. And I really do think that anyone who listens to this is going to walk away with having some real concrete strategies and maybe even some mindset shifts going into their new school year. So I just want to thank both of you.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you.